German companies operating in South Africa have raised concerns about delay in work permits and the applications in the country, saying it is threatening jobs. The delays come despite South Africa working to modernize its visa approval system to make it easier and faster to obtain work permits. But according to an industry association, a snarl-up has limited the entry of skilled workers into the country, even though there is a dire shortage on hand.
As a result, German companies hoping to expand operations in the country are having to pause. The companies have now proposed changes to simplify the rules controlling the complex work permit regime, which have been submitted to the state legal advisor and are expected to be passed into law in the coming months. Joining us this morning to talk about this even further is a member of Parliament for the Democratic Alliance, Adrian Roos. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk about why this is happening. First of all, give us a picture of why exactly we're having issues and conversations about the work visa permits, and what exactly is the South African government? I want to believe that the government is aware of this problem. What exactly is the government doing about it?
Well, we've been chasing this up for quite a while now. A so-called visa backlog in South Africa. The reports from the minister and from his department estimate this backlog to be between 40 and 50,000 applications that are in backlog. And as much as COVID has been blamed for this, unfortunately, there's a big element of corruption involved. There's a Lubisi report which was released in South Africa last year into corruption in visa services. And this showed that between 2014 and 2021, there had been about 45,000 fraudulently issued visas. And so if you look at the backlog of 40 to 50,000 visas, and you look at how many are being issued fraudulently, if you subtract the two, then you shouldn't have a backlog at all. And so this is something that we're really trying to push in Parliament as the Democratic Alliance, is to hold the relevant officials to account at this point. Because there's a syndicate working inside Home Affairs. And this means that these work permit applications are being put on the sideline while other fraudulent applications are being processed.
Oh, wow, that doesn't look good at all. Tell us about how bad this is affecting the work and the system over there. If we can get more of these expatriates to, of course, come into work in South Africa, is it, somehow, some way also opening up space for South Africans to fill up those spaces?
Well, unfortunately not. We have a critical skills list in South Africa, and there are certain work or types of work on there that are there because there are not enough South Africans to do them. And it's sort of a balance of labor, a balance of skill that we need to fill. And apart from what I've said about the endemic corruption, there is now an issue of a backlog where visa applications become rejected as the officials try to work away the backlog as fast as possible. And so what we find is that typically different permits can be rejected up to 3 times. This means that you have to look at them 3 times again. And to give you an example of, let's say, a marriage or a spousal visa. These visas are being rejected for a lack of a marriage certificate, for example. So you have to ask yourself the question, how does the application be received in the first place without that certificate? And really the impact is tremendous. We've had stories recently, you mentioned the German examples, one company that said a couple that said they had 30 employees and they were being forced to leave because their application just wasn't being processed. And so really we've put pressure on the minister. He has now supposedly hired 13 lawyers to assist with adjudicating these visas, because apparently we were told that the persons that were there did not have the legal expertise to adjudicate these visas properly. And so, we have an issue of cadre deployment where persons are put in these positions for political reasons and not for their skills. And this is something that the Democratic Alliance has been driving in Parliament, that we get a capable state, that we get capable persons in these positions that can help us to start to work on this backlog, which is having a severe effect on jobs. If you look at our latest job statistics, year on year, we're losing 8,000 jobs per month. And it's one of Home Affairs' apex priorities is to create jobs through a working visa regime.
All right, let's also look at, losing 8,000 jobs a month is a huge number, it's a lot and it cannot be overlooked. Earlier in the year at the South Africa Investment Conference, we saw President Cyril Ramaphosa addressing the conference committee and saying to them that we're going to streamline the process for visa application to ensure that there are shorter time frames, and then there's a target for raising of over $100 billion by 2028. So I want you to give us a clear picture of what the time frames currently is. What is the time frame like to apply for these work visas? And also, do you think that to go for 2028 raising over $100 billion in forms of investment, is it possible by 2028? Is it still in line?
Well, I think, we hear a lot about big plans, and there's always a summit and a colloquium to work on a plan, to work on a proposal, to get a commitment. And what you find actually in the visa space is that we have very low-hanging fruit in South Africa. So I'll give you an example of retirement visas. And according to a question by my colleague Manny de Freitas from Tourism, we lost 500 opportunities in the retirement visa space in the last year. And what this works out to is about 220 million rand per annum in revenue that these persons would have brought. And then we have the digital nomad visa, which South Africa is lagging behind. These were part of the promises that were made in terms of South Africa's visa regime renewal that you're referring to. But if you look at each of those digital nomads, or the so-called digital nomads, they invest between 55 and 90,000 rands per month in the local economy. So the amounts there go into the billions. If you just had to implement what you're talking about, the visa regime changes. And unfortunately, what we have is more delays on those visa regime changes. They were already supposed to happen a month or two ago. They were mooted earlier this year, and it was claimed that they were ready. But really, we have some low-hanging fruit as well. The digital nomad visa, it's supposed to be in place. We're supposed to have these persons coming here that live and invest in South Africa. We're supposed to clear the way for retirement visas for those persons to come and live and work here. In South Africa, 1 in 12 jobs is created through the tourism industry. And so the quicker we can get that resolved, the quicker we can have real persons coming in, real money, real investment in an industry sector which is a significant component of our economy. And that is really a way to see an economy grow, is to cut the red tape and to allow persons to come here, to live, to spend money, to boost our local businesses and grow the economy that way. And so, there are a number of summits with promises and proposals, and they often don't really ever seem to result in anything. And sometimes you need to go back to the low-hanging fruit and just, fire your corrupt officials, get a capable state in place, get capable people to do the job, and then you can reap the rewards of these low-hanging fruit that we are currently unfortunately missing out on, and what you see in the job figures.
The corruption you speak about, and the need to fire these ones who, of course, have been carrying out fraud in the system. Is this really just an offshoot of, the corruption that currently exists in South Africa in different ministries and, and agencies? Or is this just particular about the work permit, space? And also, do you expect that there would be a thorough investigation, with the current government in South Africa, and people will actually be fired, to get this, this thing moving again?
Look, on a macro scale, the Parliament of South Africa has been criticized by our Constitutional Court for failing to take action on the Zondo report into mass corruption across various departments in government. And the same thing is really happening here in Home Affairs. So we have what's called the Lubisi report, which looked into the fraud and corruption specifically in Home Affairs and the permitting department. And it's been over a year since the preliminary findings, where we find that no action has been taken. And so there's a desire and a willingness to undertake investigations. But once those investigations produce a report, then there isn't any action taken. So, for example, the chief director of permitting was supposedly fired for issuing some fraudulent permits. But when we ask the minister, well, what civic criminal action is going to be taken, they are not willing to do that. And until you do that, you are not going to set an example to persons that are in the system that there'll be consequences to their actions. If we look at work permits, yes.
Oh, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Now, I was just going to say, so if we look at work permits in particular, there are supposed to be agents in Home Affairs that assist these companies with doing it. So President Ramaphosa, instructed the department to say, please, these persons that have made commitments to South Africa to invest in South Africa, please go and look at those permits and prioritize them. It's supposed to happen, but unfortunately, when your system is so broken, it is difficult to actually implement that because you don't have again, as I say, the expertise and the capability. So the commitments were there, but the staff with the capability to do the work were not there. And this is something, again, as I say, the Democratic Alliance has been pushing the minister to get these people on board, to get the people that have the legal expertise that can adjudicate these, so that we can get forward and actually these companies can be able to invest in South Africa and get on with the work of creating jobs here in South Africa.
All right. I'd like you to also share with us if this might pose a challenge as to looking at South Africa's relationships with other nations. There have been nations, for example, who have accused South Africans of being xenophobic in certain areas. We remember when the Limpopo MEC made a statement asking people of Zimbabwe to head back to their country so that she could provide, because the resources she had was not enough to provide for the people of South Africa. So there are people who have in some way accused some South Africans of not wanting foreigners to live among them. Do you think that these challenges would further strengthen that argument and might cause a rift in diplomatic relations or relations with other countries?
Yeah, look, in this case, it seems to be that a system has been created. In that Lubisi report that I've referred to, they spoke about basically a criminal syndicate that was running inside the permitting department. And so I don't necessarily believe that has to do with xenophobia or the specific persons themselves, rather a case of creating a system where fraudulent visas can be issued and making the legitimate system as slow as possible so that you create a system where other avenues need to be explored in order to get your visas and permits. And so we really believe it's more a case of that than xenophobia.
Okay, and also is it safe to say that this is also a reflection of the Cyril Ramaphosa government and the ANC government? Is it a reflection on them? Can they be blamed for this as well and counted as maybe one of their failures?
Look, I think going back to the Zondo report and that, it's under the Ramaphosa government, there's been an unfortunate, you could almost say a decline in accountability. And if you do not hold anybody to account, then, these syndicates, they run riot and they establish themselves within your government departments through cadre deployment, which is a policy of the African National Congress government. And they establish themselves there. So they're able to operate inside that environment. And even if they are found through an investigation to be culpable of a crime, they are then not prosecuted. And so really, this is a serious problem in South Africa, this thing of a lack of accountability, a complete lack of accountability.
All right. Adrian Roos, thank you so much for your time this morning. We hope, of course, that the South African government understands what's at stake and, of course, takes immediate action. If things do not improve, of course, I'm sure that we would like to have you back sometime in the future to, of course, share more on this. Thanks for your time once again.
Thank you.